The jungle captivates our imagination for countless reasons, from programs and movies centered on daring jungle expeditions to the real-life wonders of unique plants and wildlife found only in these dense terrains. The allure is undeniable. Of course, the jungle can be perilous, but the discoveries it holds often justify the risk, though not always. After all, not everything unearthed there is pleasant or easy to explain. With that in mind, here are 18 scary jungle discoveries that cannot be explained. Snake Island. You may think that a place called Snake Island is just the setting for some kind of horror movie or television show, but it is a very real place and it is very, very dangerous. Specifically, this island can be found off the coast of Brazil, and it's actually illegal to step foot there unless you're a member of the military or an approved scientist who has been given explicit permission to be there. Why anyone would want to go there outside of those parameters would be a true mystery to me. After all, this place is not only loaded up with snakes, but some of the most deadly and rare snakes in the world can be found there. Some of the snakes are even endemic to the island, which makes it a place to both protect and quarantine from those who may get some kind of bad ideas. While the exact population numbers of all the snakes on the island are actually unknown, we do know that some of the individual species numbers are in the thousands. So, when you multiply that number by the many species of snakes on the island, you get a place you really should never go to. But I'll answer your question. How does such a place exist in the first place? Well, simply put, during the Ice Age, there was a land bridge between the island and Greater Brazil. However, when the water levels rose, the bridge got cut off. The snakes then had to rapidly adapt to the island they were stuck on, and that accidentally led to their population numbers spiking. Just to remind you, it's illegal to go there without government permission, and given that many of these snakes are venomous, I'm doing you a favor by continually warning you not to step foot on that island. Oh, and if not obvious, this island would be the one place even Indiana Jones wouldn't dare to venture to. The Lost City. From a distance, jungles may seem to be a place that's only inhabited by animals and plants. However, over the many years of human history, various cultures have constructed cities of all shapes and sizes in these places, only to have the jungle consume them once those civilizations moved on or even died out. Earlier in 2024, one such lost city was discovered in the Amazon jungle. This particular finding is important for a key reason. It's apparently been hidden for tens of thousands of years. That paints a brand new picture of who may have lived in the Amazon long ago and what they were actually capable of. The houses and plazas are in an area in eastern Ecuador that are connected by an astounding network of roads and canals. We typically try to think of those kinds of things as modern advances, but it just goes to show that people knew how to make things easier for themselves even that long ago. Another thing that's important about the city is its location. It apparently stood in the vicinity of a volcano, which may have been why they stayed there initially, as volcanic soil is some of the most fertile on Earth. On the flip side though, the volcano might have erupted, which then buried the city. One last thing to point out is that most would agree this is the oldest piece of civilization found in the Amazon so far. That's a scary thing to think about because it means we likely know even less than we think we do about the area to begin with. Freaky campsite. A classic horror movie trope is that people are just going through the woods or a jungle and they accidentally stumble across something that they weren't meant to see, and then they get all wrapped up in something that's truly sinister. A man from Huntington, New York had one such encounter when he was going hiking in that area and came across a sight that defied all belief. First, he noticed that there were some missing person posters on various trees, and that would be weird, but not all that freaky, except for the fact that there were actually a couple dozen of them, all depicting real people who were actually missing at that time. As he continued to wander around the area, he found himself looking at more unexplained things, like a wooden cage on the site and clear signs of human life, yet nobody was there. Anyone would have been rightly freaked out by such a thing, so he naturally went to the police to figure out what was going on. Surely enough, the police investigated the area but came to just as weird a conclusion. Apparently, all of it was just for a Halloween party. The police talked to the person at the nearby property, and they noted that it was just set dressing they were using later on, and had even had a party earlier in the year with the same decor. They promised to take it all down once they were done. Now, while that is an answer, it's still a pretty morbid one. I mean, why would anyone go to those kinds of extremes for a Halloween party, plus use real people on real missing person posters instead of using fake ones with partygoers? Let's talk about the thumbnail. Now, I'm not really sure exactly how to define this particular image, so I'm going to give you a bit of a backstory first. There are absolutely plenty of snakes in the jungles of the world that are massive in every way. We do know of one from Brazil that was an anaconda measuring about 10 meters and 400 kilos. It was so big it had to be carried away by heavy machinery. That brings us to this picture, which is admittedly just a little blurry to actually see what's going on, so I'll just tell you the story that comes along with it. Apparently, the claim is that this picture depicts two massive anacondas that are trying to eat a great big bird. But the problem? Well, they're both dead, so there's that. It is hard to tell what's actually going on here because of the blurriness and the obvious editing that went on with this picture, but the story states that the two anacondas were scrapping over who would get the bird, and then they both tried to eat it at the same time, and then they both died. How does that even work? I'm not really sure, and it honestly doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you think about what anacondas can do. You see, anacondas are snakes that don't use venom to kill their prey. They actually use constriction. They make sure that their prey is lifeless before swallowing it whole, like these two apparently attempted to do. But the catch is that when they want to eat large prey, they dislocate their jaws so that they can better consume the meal and get it to go down. The idea that these two snakes both choked on the same bird at the same time, that's just a little bit suspect at best. If anything, one would have attempted to kill the other before getting to the bird. As always, you can let me know your thoughts in the comments section down. Japanese soldier. When a country is at war, one of the things that's drilled into every soldier's head, no matter their rank or role, is that they have a job to do, and that their country needs them to do it no matter what, and no matter how long it may take to complete that task and win the war. In World War II, multiple countries, including Japan, tried to drill that into their soldiers, so much so that some felt that death was the only way outside of total victory. Enter a Japanese soldier who was in Guam's jungles for 30 years after the end of the Second World War. That's because he felt that the war was still going on, that he had a job to do, and he didn't know otherwise. He wasn't alone at first. He was actually part of a group that went into the forest after a key battle with the United States. Slowly, over time, his comrades died, and by the time he was found 30 years later, he was so physically weak that he couldn't even fight back against those who had found him. He later wrote a memoir about his time in the jungle, and it's a fascinating and terrifying read about how far one soldier would go to stay alive and keep fighting for his nation. The boiling river. Nature can be scary at any point in time. It just needs to warm up to that point. And in the Amazon, it hasn't just warmed up in one river, it's straight up boiling hot. This is La Bamba, aka the Boiling River, and its name is literal in every way that matters. The river you're seeing is apparently the only boiling river in the world, and I'm honestly not really sure how it's possible. You would think there may be a volcano nearby, or that there were geothermal vents pumping heat into this section of the river. But that's not the case. There are theories that the Earth itself is providing the heat in some way that we just can't see. The locals use this river to boil their food and clean their clothing, proving once again that humans know how to use the local environment to their advantage whenever possible. The humpback whale. Whales are actually one of the few creatures in the world that it's fine not to be scared of, outside of orcas, of course. But that's more of a personality issue than a species issue. So, if I told you that there was a humpback whale found in the Amazon, that may not surprise you given that whales live in the oceans and bodies of water near them. Except I'm not talking about the waters around the Amazon. I'm talking about the ones that are upon land in the Amazon River. It was found so far inland that people were stumped at first as to how it even got there. Then, as they looked closer at the whale, they noticed its young age and that it was likely dead before it even made it to land. They realized the truth. The whale was washed ashore by the currents and tides, literally dropped off by the high water levels before they receded once again. So, it simply came down to the force of the water shoving the whale all the way up there. Threatened snake species. One of the key things about the Amazon jungle that cannot be ignored is that we haven't even come close to discovering all of the species inside it. The place is so dense that mounting an expedition of any kind that is meant to last a while is almost a death sentence. Yet we keep trying because we find new species, like these rather beautiful snakes, that have to be studied even more. However, that's where another scary element comes into play. The snakes themselves aren't too much of a threat, but the fact that their homes are in danger because of mining absolutely is. Mining happens in pretty much every area of the Amazon, and it's slowly whittling the forest down to nothing. It's so bad that corruption ensures deforestation continues. If it keeps being allowed, we're not going to discover any new species of animals or plants in the Amazon, because the Amazon itself is going to be gone. Death cap mushroom. Remember the story of the kids that got lost in the Amazon from before? Maybe you remember why they survived. It's because they knew what they could and couldn't eat in the jungle. If you were suddenly dropped into the jungle, could you say the same about yourself? If you answered no, allow me to show you one of the most dangerous things in the world that you should definitely avoid: the death cap mushroom. This is a specific kind of mushroom that doesn't have only one toxin inside of it. It can actually have several. It's so deadly, in fact, that it's been killing people for so long it's actually been the cause of death for a Roman emperor. Thus, you'll want to avoid eating this mushroom. However, there's a twist in the tale. Recently, it was uncovered that the mushroom has a specific toxin in it that could potentially help to treat cancer. Not cure it, but treat it and potentially ensure that remission doesn't happen with patients. It's an interesting thing to ponder, whether something that gives death could also give life. And yet, that's also why we need to study these things vigorously, because you just never know what may be the thing that could actually save your life down the road. The Last Tribesmen. Previously, I told you about the dangers of chopping down the entirety of the Amazon jungle, but there's one element I left out. There are native tribes that have been in the jungle for quite a long time and have thrived in their primitive ways. Most nations would fight to allow them to keep their ways and cultures. However, not in the Amazon. Instead, people are allowed to fight them, kill them, and even chase them off their land, because they own no land, despite the fact that they've been there a lot longer than everyone else. That led to an entire tribe in Brazil being officially wiped out in 2022 when the last of that tribe died, alone, having seen the massacre of his people many years before by ranchers and miners. Make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, this was a case of genocide, and it's scary that it went unpunished. The Awa people. If you think the tribe I just talked about was alone in the dangers that the people of South America are placing on them, you'd be wrong. In 2019, footage of a tribesman belonging to the AWA people was caught on camera and spread around Brazil and beyond to ensure that people knew about the indigenous groups living in the Amazon. Outside of ranchers and miners, there are illegal logging rings secretly funded by the government and corporations that are driving tribes like the AWA out of their sacred homes. Other tribes have come in to try and help the AWA, including proving that they live in areas that various commercial interests are trying to encroach upon. Again, if this kind of thing is not stopped, it will end up being a genocide. World War II bunker. Now, let's talk about something a bit more uplifting. Over in Scotland, a bunker that had been hidden since World War II was rediscovered, and its code name was Scallywag. Built during World War II, the bunker would have served as the base of operations for an auxiliary unit. These were special units placed around the borders of the nation to be ready to defend the homeland should they be invaded by the Axis powers. But it goes deeper than that. These weren't only militias or basic citizens, they were a secret elite force meant to be the last line of defense should things go wrong. They would have acted much differently than other units, using the territory to their advantage, as they would know it better than the enemy. They were even known as Churchill's Secret Army, which is both cool and kind of terrifying in the end. Cabin in the woods. Here's a cabin that was found in the Arcata Community Forest in California back in 2015. The reason it's odd is due to the man who discovered it. Marc-Andre had been in the forest for 30 years prior for his job, and when he went back decades later to remark the trees for his position, he found himself looking at a cabin that had definitely not been there before. As you can see, it was small but quite well built and clearly meant for someone to stay in for a short time before moving on. After contacting a ranger to get him inside, they found that the place was stocked with supplies and even had an oven. Apparently, somebody had been using it as a kind of seasonal home for hunting and other activities. Whatever works for you, I guess. Mysterious mangrove forest. Here's a twist on all of the things I've talked about so far. We're going to Mexico, where I'm not talking about something that's in the forest, but the forest itself, which is just a little freaky. Found in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, a very curious mangrove forest exists that is entirely landlocked from the rest of the nation and yet has been around for about 125,000 years without even being disturbed by humans. As I showed you with the Amazon, people just love disturbing forests. The key thing scientists researched was how this mangrove forest came to be when the water levels weren't even high enough to sustain them. That's when they realized that the forest was born when the waters were high enough, and then it simply adapted to live without them. Trees are incredibly enduring beings when left to their own devices. Body in the woods. Now, we'll go all the way down to Alabama to reveal a story that happened earlier in 2024. The remains of a man were found in the Talladega National Forest after a hunter stumbled upon his body. Once the body was discovered, officials came in to try and identify the man and determine the cause of death. Thankfully, the body was successfully identified, and it was noted that the person who passed had a truck that was discovered nearby. At the time, it wasn't really known how the person had died, but foul play did not seem to be a factor. So then that leaves the question, what actually happened to the man? It's hard to say. It's possible that he could have had a natural death, like a heart attack, or he could have hurt himself in a way that prevented him from getting help. Either way, it's not something anyone wants to find while going through a forest. Missing boy. The story of the children in the Amazon jungle surviving for 40 days was truly wondrous and touching, but it's hardly the only tale of kids getting lost in the jungle and then being found once again. In 2021, a young boy was lost in the Australian bush and had been missing for about 4 days before being spotted by officers on his family property. The boy was drenched, had multiple cuts and bruises, and had even been bitten by ants, but overall, he seemed to be in okay condition. The true mystery is what led the boy to vanish the way he did and why it took 4 days for him to be found. The young boy had autism, which could have led to his random departure. Either way, he was found to be alright, and that's what matters in the end. St. Creed, Holy Well. In general, wells are not all that scary unless the girl from The Ring is inside one, or you fall down it and Lassie isn't there to save you. In this case, there is a place known as St. Creed Holy Well that people visit deep within a jungle to seek blessings. There actually used to be a church there, which would explain why the well was built in the first place. What might be the scariest thing of all, though, is that when one British couple went to the well, they were met by a singing woman who introduced herself as a healer and asked the well to help a family member. Well, okay then. Island of the Dolls. This is one of those classic scary places on the internet, and one you would be wise not to visit, if you believe in anything supernatural. The long and short of this place is that there was once a man who left his family to live on this island. No sooner had he done that than he is said to have found a young girl's body in a nearby canal. It's scary, but it's not all that terror-inducing. That is, until he buried her body and then soon felt that she may have been haunting him. Near that moment, he found a doll in the canal and put it up on the island for her to play with. As time went on, he kept filling the island with dolls, all in an effort to get the girl's spirit to leave him alone. His body would later be found drowned in that very same canal where he had found the girl's body. The Amazon jungle. Finally, and most fittingly, we talk about the largest jungle and/or rainforest in the world, the Amazon. I touched upon it earlier, but there are still so many things that are yet to be discovered in this place, which is why so many go into it and attempt to learn more. It's truly scary how little we do know about it, as our video has already proven. There are species of plants and animals that still need to be discovered, ancient civilizations that have left artifacts in it to be uncovered, and native people who still need to be protected. Hopefully, we develop a true appreciation for this jungle soon, so that every discovery we make is not done under the pressure of a ticking clock as the jungle is slowly erased. Well, that's all from the jungle and the many weird, creepy, and shocking things that have been discovered there over the years. Which of these findings did you think was the scariest of the lot? And which do you think are things that need to be looked into more? Perhaps there's another jungle discovery that should have been noted in this video. Be sure to let me know all about it in the comment section down below. Also, check out all the other cool things that are showing up on the screen, and I will see you next time.